Hello and welcome back to my 2024 election prediction, and this time I'll be factoring in the 2020 polling error. So in 2020, the polls favored the Democrats in almost every state. And in 2024, if there's even a similar polling error, it seems like the results will shock you. And before we continue, if you want to support my channel, make sure to like and subscribe. It's free, and whenever you want, you can unsubscribe. And in doing so, you'll be able to join the 12%. Anyway, back to the video. So now that we have the polling error, let's go through the safe states first, and then we'll go through each and every battleground state and see who will win in 2024, judging by the battleground state polling error. So we start with Washington, Oregon, and California, which will all go to Kamala Harris. Oregon by a slightly lesser amount, but it'll still go to Harris. Same with Hawaii. Colorado, which was one of the few states to actually poll more favorably for Donald Trump, and New Mexico, which will also go to Kamala Harris. Illinois will go to Harris, and on the East Coast, New York, which had one of the biggest, if not the biggest, polling error for one or the other candidates, we can see that Republicans outperformed the polls by 15% on election day. So that's just an interesting fact. And now we have Vermont, Connecticut, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, DC, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Maine's first. If you were to ask me which of these states will be the closest, I will say it is New Jersey. But New Jersey will still go to Kamala Harris in this upcoming election. Its polling error was about 4.5, and there is almost no chance it goes to Trump in this upcoming election, maybe 5% chance maximum. For Donald Trump, he picks up Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, Utah, Alaska, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Nebraska's first, Nebraska's third, Kansas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Arkansas, Missouri, Indiana, Kentucky, Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, South Carolina, and West Virginia pretty solidly. Some polls have Iowa being somewhat close, but the polling error in Iowa was R plus 6.8, so we'll solidly go to Donald Trump in this election. Texas was R plus 4.2, and Florida was R plus 5.8. All three states will go to Donald Trump, especially considering this polling error. Texas won't even be in this margin. Texas will be in a pretty solid margin for Donald Trump. And now Trump takes the lead by 5 electoral votes. And now we get to Ohio, which currently is polling pretty favorably towards Donald Trump. We can see that Ohio is polling towards Donald Trump with almost double digits, except for this one poll, which has Donald Trump leading by plus 9. If a similar margin happens, Donald Trump would lead by over plus 10, and it would be safely going to Donald Trump. While I don't think it'll go to Donald Trump by this margin, I do think the polls are pretty accurate this time around. I still think it will go to Donald Trump pretty solidly. At worst, it'll go to Donald Trump by a slightly lesser margin, but with the polling error, it goes to Trump solidly. Next, we'll go to Virginia. So Virginia actually had an R plus 2.3 polling error, so polled more towards President Biden by about 2 points. If it has a similar polling error, it will go to Kamala Harris, because as we can see, polls in Virginia are Kamala Harris plus 3. So Virginia will still go to Harris, but by just a tilt margin. And Virginia should safely go to the Democrats. It went safely to Biden back in 2020, went to Clinton by a decent amount. The fact that it's not safely going to Harris essentially is spelling disaster for the Harris campaign. If she can't even pick up Virginia pretty solidly, there's no way she'll pick up the states that went to Donald Trump in 2020 or came close to going to Donald Trump in 2020, like North Carolina, Georgia, Pennsylvania, etc., as you'll see later in this prediction. But before that, Trump picks up Maine's second, whereas Harris picks up Nebraska's second. And now our next two states are Maine and New Hampshire, both in the Northeast. New Hampshire had an R plus 3.3 shift. Maine had an R plus 1.8. So both states will be pretty similar to their polls. They poll pretty accurately. And both states will still go to the Democrats. Both states poll towards the Democrats. We can see, according to the betting markets, both states will pretty solidly go to the Democrats. It seems like, with over 80% chances for both of them. So both states still go to Kamala Harris in this election, and if you want further proof, we can go to the polls. And in New Hampshire, Harris is leading, and also in Maine, Harris is leading. Next, we have Minnesota, the home of Tim Walz. Minnesota actually had a pretty small polling error, so the polls in Minnesota are relatively accurate. And Minnesota is likely going to Kamala Harris in this upcoming election. As we can see by the polls in Minnesota, it is polling towards Harris by pretty decent margins. Even when factoring in the polling error in 2024, it still seems like New Hampshire and Maine will both go to Kamala Harris. Currently, Harris is 7 electoral votes ahead of Donald Trump, but there is still 93 electoral votes left to tally up and see who will win. So let's round out the rest of the Midwest / Rust Belt. And in Wisconsin, there was a 7.6% polling error, and Michigan had a 5.2% polling error. If there are even similar errors in 2024, as we can see, Harris is leading by 2.1 in Michigan, and in Wisconsin, Harris is leading by 3.5. If there are even similar errors, Donald Trump will win both states in 2024, bring himself to 244 electoral votes. And now let's go to the West Coast, being Nevada and Arizona, which offer a combined 17 electoral votes. Nevada and Arizona historically have pretty good polling, with Nevada shifting to the right on election day about 3.7, Arizona about 2.3. And according to the polls, both states are really close, with Trump actually leading in Arizona and Trump barely trailing in Nevada. So if there are even similar polling errors, Donald Trump will win in both states in 2024 against Kamala Harris. Now he's up to 261 electoral votes and needs to win just one of these remaining 3 states to win this election as a whole. So we're going to start with Georgia, and Georgia will likely be one of, if not the closest state in this election, as it went to Biden by the closest margin in 2024, being 0.24, narrowly beating Arizona, which had a margin of 0.31. Georgia had a very small polling error, being 0.6, but just enough to bring Donald Trump ahead of Kamala Harris in this upcoming election. So Georgia does win the prize of the most accurate pollster, except for Louisiana, and California actually. And out of the swing states, Georgia is extremely close. So Georgia, hats off to you for being a very close swing state in this election, and it will go to Donald Trump in 2024. So Trump currently leads 277 to 226 against Kamala Harris, and this looks like it will be close to even an electoral landslide. I use that term loosely, as 300 plus electoral votes is not a landslide, but still, it does seem like Trump will win pretty significantly, especially considering North Carolina and Pennsylvania both had 3+ percent point voter shifts. We can see Pennsylvania is narrowly going to Kamala Harris, and with the voter shift, it will go to Donald Trump in 2024. As for North Carolina went to Trump in 2016 and 2020 and is polling towards Trump in 2024 and will likely go to Trump once again, especially if we consider this polling shift on election day. So now Trump wins 312 to 226, and he even beats his 2016 election against Hillary Clinton. So Trump wins this election if there is a similar polling error as 2020 against Kamala Harris. Of course, that much of a polling error is not guaranteed, but it's very much possible that the polls are underestimating Donald Trump in this election. So with that being said, if you want to see more of these videos, make sure to like and subscribe, and thank you for watching.